West says that Jesus was audaciously going around claiming to be God himself. I don't think that's true. Nowhere in Mark, Matthew, or Luke does Jesus actually claim to be God in his own words. At best, it's just in John's Gospel that divine claims begin to appear. I and the Father are one, whoever has seen me has seen the Father, before Abraham was, ego eimi. I actually still don't think even these count, and we'll explain why in another video, but let's just say that they do. Even if this was Jesus explicitly claiming to be God, don't you think it's a bit suspicious that these claims only show up in our latest gospel? If Jesus was known to be walking around claiming explicitly to be God himself, did the other three gospel authors just not think this was relevant? A minor, unimportant detail not worth including?
Essentially, here's the key question I'd love for you to weigh in on, Bill. To confidently believe that Jesus is God, do we need explicit first-person claims? And did Jesus adequately claim to be God in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which came before John?
In my published work, I've tried to show that historically, Jesus of Nazareth made highly significant christological claims about himself, whereby he put himself in the place of God himself. For example, he claimed to be the long-awaited Jewish Messiah. He claimed to be the Son of God in a unique sense. He claimed to be the divine human Son of Man prophesied by the prophet Daniel. And all of these offices or titles come together at the trial scene in Mark's gospel. The high priest, the leader of the Sanhedrin, charges Jesus under oath, "Are you the Christ? Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" And Jesus responds, "I am. And you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." A virtual quotation from Daniel 7. So here you see claims that assert the divinity of Jesus by use of these significant Christological titles. And immediately the high priest and the Sanhedrin recognized the blasphemy of what he had said and condemned him to death. Now, in addition to these explicit claims, there are also implicit Christological claims that Jesus made, whereby he put himself in God's place. For example, his claim to be able to forgive sins. In Mark chapter 2, we have the story of the healing of the paralytic. And Jesus says to the man, "My son, your sins are forgiven." And Mark records that those standing about murmured and said, Who does this man think he is? No one can forgive sins but God alone. And Jesus, knowing what they're saying, says, "Which do you think is easier? To say your sins are forgiven, or rise, get up, and take your bed and go home?" And he says, "That you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." He says to the paralytic, "I say to you, rise, get up, and go home." And the man is miraculously healed. Clearly in Mark's gospel, this is a claim to divinity, exercising authority to forgive sins, an authority and prerogative that belong to God alone.
I would just add this really quickly before we move to the second one, that I think Mark has a very high Christology. So some of the implicit claims, like even in Mark 1, healing the leper, it's interesting in 2 Kings chapter 5, the king of Israel receives a request to heal Naaman of leprosy, and he says, "Am I God?" There was the sense that only God could heal leprosy. And of course, Jesus does it by his own power immediately without the ritual of Elijah. Go to Mark 2, like you explained, the healing of the paralytic clearly shows. I mean, Michael Bird wrote, he said, Jesus claims for himself an unmediated divine authority that to those steeped in Jewish monotheism looks like absolute blasphemous. You move to Mark chapter 4. Jesus rebukes the winds and the waves, and they immediately become calm. Well, the theme in Psalms is that Yahweh alone controls the sea and other waters. Hence, at the crossing of the Red Sea, we see that portrayed. The Gospels report the disciples saying, "Who then is this that even the wind and sea obey him?" This is reminiscent of the Psalms, "Who is mighty as you are, O Lord." Two more quick examples just to make this, and these are only a few of them, as you know. The demoniac bows down to Jesus. Now, what's interesting in context is he was not showing respect, but fear on behalf of the large number of demons possessing him in the thousands. This army of 2,000 or more demons was deathly afraid of Jesus, and he falls prostrate in an act of worship of a supernatural power, even greater than a legion of demons. And then finally, like you said, these implicit claims come to be explicit in Mark 14, where Jesus claims to be the divine figure, the Son of Man. And I think just to buttress this case, he comes on the clouds, divine status, served by all nations, and will have an everlasting universal kingdom. So I think the earliest Christology is a high Christology.